Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the situation we all find ourselves in at the moment with COVID-19 and thinking a little bit about how we can define our brand for the new normal. And that, of course, means sitting back and reflecting a little bit when we feel ready to do so, and that is underlined, to really understand what we can learn, what we've learned from this situation, and how we can take that learning forward. So for those who don't know me, and everybody here at the moment does, but my name is Haynes. I'm from Insight 101, and my background is that I've worked for global brands for nearly 30 years. And that has taught me the importance of having a really strong and consistent brand message, and also a clear vision and values which can sustain us and direct us in moments of severe kind of difficulty. And it's not only a means of kind of connecting with our customers and showing them that we know where we're going and building that relationship, but it's also about connecting with the people who are working for us. And that is incredibly important for those who have a team as well. And particularly now, as change is happening so quickly, and we all need to understand where we're going, and we all need that sense of direction and clarity. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will have had some things to think about, to take with you, to consider your own business when you feel the time is right. And the time may not be right for another few weeks or months. This is a change curve, which some of you will be familiar with. But it pretty much says that we all respond in a similar fashion when we have kind of big events occur in our lives. Big events that we have no control over, big events that obviously have a dramatic impact on us. And what normally happens is that massive shock, which I think we all encountered about 4 weeks ago, leaves us in, well, shock, surprise, grief, denial, frustration, all of that stuff that is just really, both personally, professionally, and with our businesses, we just don't really know how to deal with that. And so over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I suspect that the majority of us have been in this kind of moment of paralysis, if you like, wondering what's going to happen, wondering where we're going. And it's meant that we've all kind of maybe behaved in ways that we wouldn't normally behave in. And we've ended up asking ourselves questions that we wouldn't normally ask ourselves. And that's totally okay. It's totally okay and very normal to just stop and literally be knocked sideways. And I guess this webinar is all about when that feeling is over, and it will come at some point, and we'll all be very much getting to these points at different stages. We will go through that experimentation phase. We will go through that, come on now, we need to pick ourselves up and think about the future phase. And this webinar is very much directed there. It's when you feel able to think about things, here is some guidelines for the questions that you should be asking yourself. And it's really dependent on our individual circumstances. And of course, at the moment, 3 or 4 weeks later, there are unbelievable stories out there. There are stories of businesses that have been decimated. And so really, they're going to be in a situation where they can't even think about the future until they come to terms with that. There are other businesses that are on hold. Financially, that's not great for them, but they know that clients will come back, and it's only a matter of time. And so they will be probably in a better place to start thinking about the future earlier. There'll be the flourishing businesses. Now, I speak to a lot of accountants, and they are flourishing in the sense that they have never been busier. That's not to say they're getting paid work, but they are spending most of their time fighting to keep their clients alive and surviving, essentially. And what that means is that they haven't even begun to process what's happened. They haven't even begun to think about their own future. And possibly they won't for a long, long time, because those conversations, those questions from business owners around finances, they're going to come quite a lot over the next few weeks and months as the government puts things in place or doesn't. So as a flourishing business, or an accountant where you're very, very busy, this kind of moment to think about where you need to go in the future may be much further down the line. And then, of course, you've got the businesses that have literally just pivoted overnight. And that may be because their business sits well with that, and it's been quite an easy pivot. And actually, they've already done some of the work where they've thought about the future. They've thought about where they need to go. But equally, they will need to stop at some point now that they've pivoted, because they're still running and running. They'll need to think about whether that pivot is right for the future, or whether it's just a short-term fix, and that actually what they need to do is go back to where they were or find what is their new normal. And that could be quite different. So again, when you're thinking about where you're going in the future, it's much more about where you are at the moment and when you feel that the moment is right. And I say that because there are so many messages out there about people kind of saying, you must get on, you must do this, thinking about the future. And that's right. But you can only do that when you feel that you've come to terms with the grieving stage and you're ready to pick yourself up again. And that's really important from my perspective. And what we have seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks is that kind of shock and fear, which is translated into, I don't really know what to do in my business. So there are those who are still trying to trade, but feel bad about it. They don't know whether they should be selling. They don't know whether they should be marketing themselves. They don't know whether they should be delivering freebies or whether they should deliver discounts. And there's that real sort of fear of, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Now, I think it's fair to say that if you have a strong brand with a strong vision or purpose, if you want to call it that, and also strong values, you can use that in order to guide you. So acting really very much as guardrails for how you should be behaving moving forward. So it's not what you do necessarily, it's how you do it. And this webinar today is going to start you on that track of, let's see how we managed over this time and how now I can put together my brand and my messaging again and make sure that I'm totally fit for the future, because I think we're all in agreement that this isn't going to be a one-off. We may respond to it much better in the future. Governments will have tried and tested procedures, but I think we all need to know that fundamentally we need to be prepared for this again. So it's about thinking about being fit for purpose in the future. And that starts with asking ourselves some fundamental questions about what we want to be and what our values are and what we've learned from this 3 to 4 weeks. And I think what we may have believed was true 4 weeks ago may definitely be in really sharp focus now, or maybe we have changed our thinking a little bit or our beliefs. But fundamentally, what's absolutely critical is to set out our stall for the future, because purpose-driven and values-driven businesses are on the rise. And that is the conversation that we were having before COVID-19 happened. And that is what we'll be talking about during and after. So this is a slide that I showed in another presentation that I did a few weeks ago, talking about how businesses are already suggesting that in order to keep customers engaged and employees engaged, they need to behave in a different way, and they need to think about their values, and they need to think about connecting on a human level, and that it's not all about profit, which does sound very idealistic in many ways. But actually, the understanding is, if you deliver a vision which is so compelling, is that you get people who want to work for you, they're more productive in being there because they want to be there. And equally, that translates into very strong kind of customer service and the transferal of those values to the customers. So incredibly important to think about the purpose and the direction of your brand and how you're going to move it forward. And of course, there are lots of examples at the moment where there are businesses and brands that have fared well so far, and many examples of those that haven't. And talking about Wetherspoons here, for instance, where the CEO decided that he was going to keep his pubs and bars open, thinking primarily about profit rather than about people and the welfare not only of his employees but equally of his customers. But of course there are other examples of brands where they have connected on a much more human level and have realized that the fundamentals are about safety, security, not only of their employees, but of their customers and the wider community. So there are examples where brands have got things right, examples where they've got things wrong, and we don't all have the answers. But I think what's really worthwhile doing now is looking at that, looking at the landscape, looking at what we've seen and learned, and thinking about our own business and what we're going to take forward as a result. Because there's one thing that we do know is that there's going to be a new normal. There'll be new ways of working, new business models and concepts as a result of this, new brand messages that will need to be communicated, and we'll need to make decisions on how our business is going to go forward as and when things are lifted, because of course they will be, and what change we need to execute and how much. And obviously the new normal will be potentially, I think everybody expects it to change completely. I think we will obviously, as human nature dictates, that we'll go back a little bit. But I don't think things will ever be the same again, because we're now driving businesses from our own homes, so the benefits of that, the benefits of the things that we've learned, I think we'll take with us. So it's up to us now to think about that new normal and to think about what that means for our business. So for us, I think really importantly, the message is to stop and think about where we need to go. And that is stopping thinking about the future and where we could go, because actually there aren't going to be many times in our lives and our business lives where this total shutdown will occur. And everybody's in the same position. yes, we're all on different roads in terms of how we manage change, but we'll go through the same things essentially. So it's about stopping, taking some time to think about the new normal and what that means to you. And the way that you do that, fundamentally, there are three phases which I would take clients of mine through, and three phases that you need to think about yourselves. So the first phase is really just to sit back and review. Sit back and review your business, your strategy, and how well it stood up to the test. Think about your brand, whether you had a brand that was strong enough to guide you, to guide your messages and your communications, to guide you in your activities. And for those, obviously, who have people working for us or suppliers around us, you know, how did we work with them? How did we behave? Did we have a strong enough brand in place to guide our conversations, to guide those difficult sometimes conversations that we've all had with clients or suppliers or, you know, partners or whatever that is. So the first thing is to kind of review. And if you do have a team, it's really important to review with them as well and to get their perspective. And equally with your clients and your suppliers. What's their perspective? What did they see? And I would counsel you now as well to think about your peers. You know, a lot of the time we think about our competitors, don't we? But I've spent quite a bit of time over the last few weeks talking in groups with like-minded businesses, like-minded individuals. And actually what you get is those learnings, those insights, those feelings of how other similar businesses coped. And that's really important because I don't think you should feel alone in defining what your business future looks like necessarily. It's about reading the market and reading what other people are doing. And then, of course, the next stage is to redefine or at least tweak. Think about what you've learned from the review process. Think about the business model. You know, were you actually able to continue online during these testing times? Or did it absolutely just didn't work for your business? And how can you put something in place to make sure that you are future-proof? So go through what is the new normal for you. You know, if you have teams, what are the structures? How should teams be supported? What initiatives need to be put in place? What behaviours would you want to see among your team? And obviously think about your brand and the purpose, because that is the starting point. What do you believe in? What do you want to deliver moving forward? What have you learned that's really important? And then, of course, the last thing is that relaunch, and that comes at a time when the market is back and everything is up and running. But of course, we can make plans for that. We can ensure that our website reflects the new changes, our social media and all of that. And equally, our employees understand where the business is going. And hopefully, if you do have people that you work with, even suppliers, they need to be kept in the dialogue. They need to understand where things are going. They also need to have a sense of ownership. So I think even with suppliers, if you're making changes, it's very good to get their opinion, to seek their counsel, and to see whether they think it will work. So 3 distinct phases. I would suggest at the moment that we're all in that review phase. And the questions you should be asking yourself during the review about your brand: what did I learn about myself and the business and the brand that I didn't know 3 or 4 weeks ago? Did my values and my brand live up to the test, or do they need a rethink? Now, the test for me is Should I advertise? Should I market my business? What would the message be? Will this be perceived as crass, etc., etc.? If you didn't feel that you had a framework to think around, then maybe you need to think about that again. And I myself have made a couple of decisions recently where I suddenly felt I wasn't sure. And then I realized that actually the reason I wasn't sure and I felt bad about the dialogue I was having with myself was because actually it didn't fit with my values. And so then I was able to make a decision very quickly. So did your business model fit up to the test, or does it need to flex? And that may just be a happy subsequent kind of outcome of all of this, that actually what you've been doing up until now was probably overkill, and you didn't need to be rushing around the country, or didn't need to be kind of having endless face-to-face conversations, whatever it means to your business. Did you wing it? You know, and a lot of us, let's be honest, a lot of us will have had to wing it, because I think the word that we've all heard is unprecedented, haven't we? The unprecedented times. And yes, that word has suddenly been overused, but none of us have experienced something like this, and we've all had to wing it. So the question is, what did we learn as we wing, you know, when we did? And did we behave in accordance to fundamentals of our brand and what we believe in, or did sometimes we veer away from it? And then culturally, you know, and culture isn't just about having a team. It's about having our brand guide us in our own behaviours and our actions and messages. You know, did we suddenly behave in a different way based on the panic and the shock? Can we look back and think, actually, you know, we didn't necessarily behave as we would want to? And then it's about looking, being realistic and moving forward. Did our brand guide our conversations with our target clients and customers? And did our teams feel sufficiently supported? And of course, that is very important if you have larger teams, because they are going to feel incredibly vulnerable, because it's not their business. So they're not totally in control. So did they feel supported, and did they feel that the brand guided them? I had a conversation with a contact of mine, and actually he had done the work, and he found that his teams responded beautifully over the last 3 to 4 weeks, because they knew what was expected of them. They knew culturally the behaviours that were needed and wanted, and actually they just went ahead and executed what they knew was kind of within the guidelines. And he was massively impressed with them, and just felt that they had delivered absolutely on target. So it does make a big difference. And then, yeah, consistency, that is important. A consistent message, consistent behaviours, even in times like this. Yeah, and did the team feel like the business had a vision for where it was going? Did they feel supported in that vision and directed? So that's the review phase. And then the next phase is redefine. Now, this could come at a much later date, but this is a canvas I developed for a QuickBooks conference that I did a couple of months back. And it's a one-pager which starts to pull together all elements of your business. So when you're thinking about your learnings, your insights, your mistakes and things that went right, you can start to populate all of that kind of learning, and most importantly, think out of the box in terms of your purpose and your values, which will underpin everything else that you do. And you'll think about your business model, your target audience, all of that good stuff. It's almost like going back to the start. Some of you will have done that, and you'll just need to tweak it. Others probably haven't used a framework like that. So that's something that you can start to think about moving forward. And then this is somewhere down the line, but this is about when things are changing, when things are getting back to the new normal, to communicate that out, to have something consistent that is brand fit, that you see across all websites, social media, all channels of communication where you're going now. So it's very important, if you have tweaks, if you have learned from this process and you have changed as a result, and equally you have thought about your purpose and your values, it's really incredibly important to launch that and to show that sort of line in the sand, if you like, so that people know where you're going. You also can start to kind of engage not only teams but your customers and take them on that journey as well. But again, highly dependent on your circumstances and the type of business and where you are in that journey. So it may be that this all sounds far too early, and in which case it's food for thought, and you can come back to that at a later time. But what can you actually do now? I think that what you can do is look at your business, sit back and think about the stuff that you've done over the last 3 or 4 weeks, the conversations you've had, the social media posts that you've put out there, you know, the networking that you've done, all of that good stuff. Just sit down and audit the decisions you've had to make. Write that down and begin to sort of think about what that means for the future. And take a moment to listen to your peers, which is what we said earlier on. Listen to what the market is saying. Listen to where you think your particular sector is going. And of course, talk to employees if you have them, or suppliers. This is a great moment to talk to them. Lots of conversations, lots of kind of thinking. And then later, if you want to start thinking about populating that canvas and really defining what your business looks like, whether that's fundamental change or just a tweak, then you have the tools to do that. But just take time to reflect whenever you feel that is right, and that I'm sure will be of great benefit. Any questions?
Hi, Philippa. Right, if we pick up on, this is to everybody, but if we pick up on some of the things that are in the news feed in a minute, but I know Rachel in particular has got a question that you want to ask Philippa. So Rachel, over to you.
Morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Philippa. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. I thought that was very thought-provoking. And my question was around a really kind of something that's been kind of mulling away for about the last 10 days.
Yeah.
This idea that, well, consumer psychology doesn't change. You know, we've been here for millennia, so, you know, we're not about to change the way or how we make decisions. But obviously some people have responded to, I don't know, the likes of Sports Direct and saying, oh, you know, not sure that how he dealt with Mike Ashley, dealt with employees or the coronavirus, not sure that that was right and chimed with me, and I'm going to not buy from them. So they're saying, customers are saying they will change their behaviour depending on how brands have dealt with it. But I'm just kind of wondering, will they change their behaviour? And it's not to say that they shouldn't, and that companies shouldn't consider their own direction and action and leading from the front, but I'm just kind of challenging that and questions like, will we change?
I think that's a question. It's two-sided, isn't it? Really, it's will that brand change?
Yeah.
And I certainly think they will learn from it. Whether they can fundamentally change as human beings, because I think some of the behaviours we've seen are at a human level, and it really shows the types of people that they are. But I think that there will have to be a veneer and some kind of setting out their stall and making up for what has happened. I don't think either of the examples we've talked about are foolish enough to know that, you know, they messed up and now they've got to think about what that means. And it may not be at a fundamental level. I can't imagine it will be, but equally, you know, they've already been in the press apologizing. So for them, it's, I guess the question is, will they learn? Will we see anything? And that can only guide our own response as customers. I think customers, you know, as we've seen in this outbreak, there are some people who care and who act appropriately, and others who don't. And I think that is down to personality and, you know, all kind, you know, very complex stuff around human behavior. But I think there will be those people who fundamentally want to buy into brands that have meaning, that do the right thing. I think that's increasingly important. And there will be those people, as we know, who will be prepared to pay that little bit more for something that has greater meaning. There will equally be people who just want to buy something that's the cheapest and they don't necessarily care. But hopefully the dialogue is changing and the dynamic of the market anyway is changing, so that those purpose-driven businesses are the ones that will probably be the healthiest in the future. I don't know whether that answers. Or...
and that's interesting, and I think it comes back for me to what you were saying about what's our purpose and brand, what do we want that to be, and further than that, who do we want as our customers? I don't want those people who are only going to say it's all about money. I don't want to work with businesses like that. So I think for me, it extends to who we choose to work with, who we choose to have as our customers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I would always encourage that anyway. And Rachel, I know that you would too. But I think this sort of experience helps us to kind of, or guides us more in that actually that's the most fundamental. Fundamentally important to us. So as I said, I've made a couple of decisions based on my value system, and I think it's helped.
Thanks for that.
Okay, Mr. Paul Croker, you've got a question?
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation, Philippa. It was really, really insightful and useful. I've made some notes here as well about it. I'm not sure if other people are in the same boat, but obviously my brand and my company is quite new. So I've made some notes here about having a clear vision, values and meaning. Now, I probably need to start pretty much at square one with this. How would you start developing these? Is there any information or advice you can give on that?
There are two bits, aren't there? I think the first bit is to think about your business model and whether that is still fit for purpose, and what you've learned over the last 3 or 4 weeks is what's possible and what isn't, because it's equally about the positives, not just the negatives. So that's one thing, which is how am I going to operate my business? And the second one is the more fundamental. You're in a great position, obviously, because as you said, you're new, you haven't established that as much. I would think the first 2 things for you to think about are your purpose. And that is, when I say purpose, I think about how you want to affect society. What do you want to give back almost? You know, a lot of people talk about their purpose around their family or their children, and that's absolutely right. That's a fundamental. But in terms of your business, what do you want to give? What is it about your business? How do you want to serve the community or the world even? So think about it like that, and think about everything you've learned over the last 3 to 4 weeks, but define what your purpose is. And obviously keep it as broad as you can, in the sense that then your business can ebb and flow and can change over the months and years. So that's the first one. The second one is to think about your values. And I would say, think about your business journey. I was actually doing a podcast yesterday and talking about my own journey. And it's taken me 30 years to get to where I am now. And I've learned a lot about myself and a lot about other people over those 30 years. And I can see almost a route map for where my values have come from, with certain experiences and aha moments and bad moments as well. So start to think about, as a human being, what is it that you stand for? What are your values? And then think about, how does that translate into your business? How does that translate into your approach? So, and think beyond integrity, trust, because those are big corporate words. Use your own language and, you know, try very much to make it deeply personal to you, because that will resonate so much more with people.
Sure. Okay.
Has anyone else, I've got a few bits here, but has anyone else got a direct question they want to ask Philippa? I'll take the silence as no. Okay. Picking up on the news feed, I think Mark raised a question there about you know, spending too much time in comparing yourself to competitors. Mark, do you want to just say a little bit more about what you meant behind that?
Yeah, sure. I can remember back in my retail days of getting transfixed by what all the other supermarkets were doing. And if you do too much of that, you lose sight of your values. You lose sight of what you're about, because you're always doing, you know, copying them or trying to catch up with them or doing. So I think it's really important when you set out a business vision. It's sometimes really, really hard to stick to it, but it's actually, in the long run, it makes you feel better. And when you have to always keep chasing other people, then you're not really following your own values, are you?
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that it's, as you say, it's what we all do or are tempted to do, and we can all feel up and down depending on what other people are doing and comparing ourselves. But if you know what you stand for, and you have the strength to go back and say, doesn't matter what everybody else is doing, this is my journey, this is my course, then I think that supports massively, as you were saying. Not easy, but it's a great way of just, and Angela will be able to talk about this as well, it's just, you know, going back and resetting for what you're all about, essentially, and just staying true to you.
Excellent. I mean, I wanted to ask on the pivoting side of things. I think you highlighted a couple of examples of how maybe people have tried to pivot and not got it wholly accurate. Obviously, I've had to pivot this business slightly, and obviously, you know, the work we're doing on the other one, which is a more fundamental overall change. Do you think it's the case that most people just need to do a little tweak? Or do you think that most people need to see this as a bit of a long-term change and maybe pivot over 50% of their business?
So what I've been hearing in the conversations I've had, and I guess there are two outcomes here, I think. There are those who are naturally entrepreneurial, and they've seen this as a great opportunity to pivot and to really change fundamentally. Those people, there are far fewer of them. You know, to be a true entrepreneur and to lead like that in a massively strategic way is very difficult, but it can be done. So there will be those businesses that absolutely see it as an opportunity to do that, and they will live by it. The rest of us will have done some tweaks. So I was talking to an Italian business owner. He has a business in the UK of 100 million turnover, all around food. And basically his whole business model for going into restaurants, etc., was completely decimated. So what he did in the end was, in 2 weeks, he set up an online business. Now he said that will not be a long-term option. he will maintain it for certain parts of the business because he set it up, it has benefits, it can bring something slightly different, but equally he will go back to kind of the former business model as well. But obviously thinking then about how can he safeguard himself, and how can he ensure that, you know, what he's learned can be learnings for the future. And then there'll be people in between who have newer businesses, have gone online, have actually found it not as difficult as they thought, and maybe they will just question their behaviours before. So for me, rushing around the region, doing face-to-face meetings all the time, is that really necessary at certain moments of the business or customer journey? Maybe not. So it will be a tweak. And I think because we've all been through it together, people will understand that. So I very much wanted to do Skype calls at one point, whereas I think some people didn't mind and other people did, and it was a little bit not frowned upon, but it wasn't as easy. But I think most people now have got on board with that, and it will just be that sort of new normal that you'll choose to meet somebody face to face when it suits, when it actually suits that conversation or that sort of stage in the relationship. But you'll fundamentally change how you sort of get to that point. But that's my perspective anyway.
Excellent, thank you. Mark Evans has just posted a question in the news feed, if everyone can see that. I don't know, Mark, if you actually just want to come on and actually read your question out and give it a bit of context.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks again, Philippa. That's really, as Rachel said, really insightful, and sort of especially the moods and the mood swing diagram that you showed. It was, I'm sure we can all relate to that. It's just from my point of view, I'm quite cynical in sort of marketing, and it's not my field of expertise, as I'm sure you know it, and it is apparent, but I look at and I hear sort of values and purpose statements, and they all sound very much the same. And if there is a unique selling point, is it actually viewed as unique, or is it just viewed as someone sort of trying to say something to get noticed? I'm not the expert, as I say, but from my point of view, I'm sort of that cynical head.
Yeah, and I think, and you're right to be cynical, but I think the best kind of response to that is how people use kind of brand vision and values. So if you're a business that does that exercise, puts it on the wall, office wall, and then just goes back to normal, then it is words on a page or on a wall, meaningless. You've ticked the box to say you've done it, and then you carry on. But I think if you as a business make them really personal and pertinent to you, and that you follow that. So the example with you is, you know, you were thinking about pivoting, about kind of pulling one concept forward in times of difficulty with the business, and saying what would really, what would be most beneficial to our customers and clients. Then it makes most sense if it's in line with who you are as a business. If you've just sort of plucked something out of the air and kind of gone, we're going to be doing this now, it has that sense of kind of desperation or disconnect. So I think if you have a vision and values which are really deep-seated, and they don't have to be talked about all the time, but if you were to review somebody's behaviours or what they came up with or new ideas, you would be able to see that there's a theme running through it. So I don't think you have to have a conversation where you go, I believe in that. You know, it's more inherently visible in what you do and you don't do.
More integrity.
Yeah, I mean, integrity is a big fat word. I call them fat words, which are meaningless. But it's what that means to you. It could be that, you know, I always say yes or no. You can always rely on me to say, yes, I'll do something, or no, I won't, and I'll stick to that. that could be your flavour of integrity. But I think it has to be incorporated into everything that you do. And certainly if you have a team, it's massively important, because it's almost a template, if you like, and it's something that they can hang on to. But again, you have to start saying to people, so these are what we believe in, these are our values, but how does that translate? What's your understanding of this within our business? How does that mean you should behave? What would you imagine that would sound like if you were talking to a client? How would you approach a difficult situation? So it's kind of using words, if you like, to turn that into really helping people, supporting people to do the right thing. Don't know whether that answers.
That's really interesting, Philippa. Really, because being a systems geek, I think once you start, because you can talk about the language, but then you can turn that into a phone script. You can turn that into a deliverable. You must answer, you must reply to this email within 24 hours. How do we define all this beautiful stuff that we believe in? How do we define it into an action? Yeah. And that's where you start developing the policies and everything around it that says we need to do this.
Absolutely.
We need to measure it, because if you don't keep control, not control, but awareness of what's happening in the team, and a system that becomes consistent, then that's when things fall down. And the first time you know about it is the customer, rather than being aware of it through a system.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. And I can imagine, Angela, that when you talk to your clients, one of the first conversations is, do you have that vision and those values? And then, so how do we translate that into what would make the best solution for your clients?
Yeah, and those big fat words, you can't actually, if someone tells me their vision is where we deliver and we do this, unless they can have an action from it, I can't actually put anything in place to measure it. Yeah. If you said, we're going to deliver everything within 24 hours or 48 hours, great, because we can measure it. But when you've got very fluffy words, if you don't translate them down, I have no way of building a system that does that and delivers it and measurable for it.
Yeah. You're not talking about two different things there. In my experience, I'm talking more so about attracting new business, looking to bring on new clients, and it's that first sort of face, that interaction that you have with brand new clients that don't know you, that you've got to explain yourself to them about your values and your purpose. And I see completely the point you're making, Angela, about having those procedures and policies in place so that there's continuity once they become a client, and it's something that can be measured. But I'm thinking more at the front end. How do you persuade a new client that you're not just the same as the rest, and those words that you've put in your website or in your purpose statement or wherever aren't just a sort of rejigged version of someone else's, if you like?
So, Mark, I've done quite a bit of work with accountants, and their most critical stage is the onboarding stage, where they get people's financial information, but they also set up that relationship and the boundaries of that relationship and what you get for the charge, for the fees that they charge. Yeah. And it's that bit. It's not necessarily talking about who you are directly like that, but it's how you approach that onboarding. What do you do? Is it, completely stress-free? Do you include a video at the front end which talks about the business and why you set it up? What are the elements that go from non-customer to customer or client? And for me, it's that. So my counsel would be, if you have that sort of purpose and values kind of already set up, then it's about brainstorming, saying, so what are the stages? What are the stages? What's the journey we want to take our clients through from the moment they see us on social media to the moment they on board with us. And that is, as Mark was talking about the watertight marketing, it's the kind of journey from not knowing about that business and brand to coming on board. It's a very subtle journey of kind of emotional connection. So you would never go, I believe in, you know, whatever, and these are my values, because that's trite. But it's about using those to say, so what would I want my clients to feel at this stage? What would I put in place? What would my conversation be?
I see. Great. No, that's useful. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, I think picking up on that as well. I mean, I've got two very different businesses. I find I think the issue that you're talking about with K-Base may be very similar to how I pitch CSRB a lot of the time, because it was originally a business of many different things. And I was trying to be everything to everybody, which I'm not saying that's what you're trying to do, but that's certainly what I was doing. And I thought that was the way to go forward. There wasn't much opportunity because it was quite mechanical to bring culture, values, my personality into it, really, because I wanted it to be bigger than just me, but I also wanted to get over my passion for it. Whereas with B2B networking, as all of you will know, because you've had the mispleasure of having to sit in front of me and let me read off a PowerPoint presentation, but it's the fact that I can put my energy and my spin on it and show you how hopefully B2B networking is very different from other alternatives. Now, there's always going to be similarities. Marketing, I mean, my background is in marketing before all the internet and everything came along, and technology. So we spent, I remember my favourite two modules, you're like this, Philippa. One was actually looking inside, it was you have to be really careful with the terminology here, but it was called Inside the Person, which was basically, I remember my lecturer putting up a massive picture of the brain and talking about rich cerebral cortexes and whatever were the ones that drive our sort of marketing decisions. And then the other side of it was completely the other end, which is about economics. And actually, you can actually sometimes do your value proposition by working all the way back to the figures and then coming forward and going, what actually do I need to sell? How much do I need to sell of it? And then what that actually does is make you more confident with the onboarding process, because you're not trying to sell everything. And I'm slightly biased at the moment because I'm going through a piece of work on a rebrand with Philippa and others at CSRB. And I'll let you guys be the judge when we've finished it in whether that process has achieved all the aims that we've all set ourselves. But I think it really is, it's hard to put that passion in sometimes at the onboarding stage without, like you just said, Philippa, without it sounding a bit trite and whatever else. I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts on how they get.
Can I ask a quick question to Philippa as well? Because lots of things were coming to mind as I was as Mark was delivering the questions then, and they were really sort of coming up strong for me, because obviously Mark and I have had a few sort of meetings together, and when we talk about onboarding, it makes me think about the total experience, like you said, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Mark, but one thing that I found with your product is you will go over and above to help people understand what you're trying to achieve, and as a, to collaborate. You welcomed me in and had a demo, and we had a great chat, and you were really, really flexible and had time, and nothing was too much trouble question wise. And I think that's the experience that that I've gone on with your company. It's different. It's different. And I've spoken to many software companies. So I think we need to look at the experience of what it's like to engage and work with a company. And that far sells anything else. It just, to me, that's what makes a difference. I don't know about you, Philippa, but that's what it just jumped out. It was very clear as to the individuals you're working with. And that doesn't have to be the business owner. It could be anybody.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, if you've taken that away with you, then that is significant. Yeah.
We've got a lot of clients that have been with us for 12, 14, 16, 18 years, and that's what we give them, that consistent, nothing's too much trouble, we're here for you if you need us, then we'll support you in it everywhere we can. And we don't have a problem with that so much, but my biggest challenge is at the front end, right at the front end. So it's interesting to get that. Thank you, Angela, for sharing that.
Yeah.
Excellent. We've ticked to 12 o'clock. So I think you'd all join me in thanking Philippa for the honest answers at the end there, and then presentation before it. Indeed, there we are. We might be on mute, but we can still clap. There we go. So thank you very much for that. It was obviously the first of our round of webinars.